The click of heels echoed rhythmically through the research facility's white corridor. Amy Martin was hurrying to the conference room, reviewing the final report for their new drug development project. The pearl necklace at her throat caught the fluorescent light with a subtle gleam. It was a precious gift from her mother, which she always wore during crucial moments. "Good morning, Director Martin," young researchers greeted her one after another. Amy returned their greetings with a gentle smile, her eyes scanning the dimly lit laboratory. The research and development division she led was entering the final phase of an innovative cancer treatment project. "Johnson, how did the culture data from last night turn out?" "Yes. The results exceeded our expectations. Please take a look at this." A young man in a lab coat eagerly held out his tablet. Amy studied the graphs displayed on the screen and nodded with satisfaction. The success of this project would have a significant impact on the pharmaceutical industry. "Excellent. At this rate, we should be ready for next month's clinical trials. The side effect numbers are lower than anticipated too. It's all thanks to your guidance, Director Martin." The laboratory was filled with energy. In the 2 years since Amy had become division head, the team's performance had steadily improved. Her calm judgment and precise direction had earned the trust of the young researchers. Just then, her smartphone vibrated discreetly. The screen showed an incoming call from Wedding Planner. Amy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Martin speaking. I apologize for calling, but regarding tomorrow's final meeting, Mrs. Carter's mother has made a special request." Amy felt a slight dizziness. The wedding preparations were also in their final stages. 2 months ago, her chance encounter with James Carter, who had visited the research facility for a real estate inspection, had dramatically changed her life. Attracted by his gentlemanly demeanor and intellectual conversation, wrapped in his polished appearance, she had decided on engagement after just 2 months. However, there was an incident that cast a dark shadow over that decision. It was the day she first met James's mother, Patricia Carter. In a private room at an upscale restaurant, Patricia, dressed in the latest Chanel suit with heavy makeup attempting to make her look younger, turned her gaze toward Amy. "Oh, so you're a researcher. It's fine for women to work, I suppose, but in our family, wives are expected to tend to the home." Dressed in luxury brands and wearing heavy makeup, Patricia looked Amy up and down as if appraising her value. Her gaze clearly held contempt. "Career women shouldn't have families, that's my belief. But since James chose you, I suppose I'll have to turn a blind eye to it, given the times we live in." Beside her, James merely offered an awkward smile at his mother's words, making no attempt to object. His attitude made Amy realize the reality she would have to face. Those words left a deep wound in Amy's heart. However, she maintained her composure, offering only a smile in response. "You're absolutely right, Mother. I'll do my best to be a good wife from now on." Patricia never understood the true meaning hidden behind those words. On the morning of the wedding day, Amy awoke quietly. Outside her window, Boston's cityscape gleamed in the autumn sunlight. The maple leaves were as vivid as the blush on a bride's cheeks. She sat at her dressing table and picked up her usual pearl necklace. "Are you ready?" Her mother Carol entered the room. Behind her stood her father Robert, who had become CEO of Brown Pharmaceuticals 6 months ago. His gaze held both gentle concern for his daughter and confidence in the plan about to unfold. "Yes, everything's perfect." Amy looked at her parents in the mirror and answered with certainty. Her pearl necklace gleamed in the morning light. "All according to plan." Amy nodded quietly at her father's words. The grand ballroom at the Four Seasons Hotel was bathed in the soft autumn afternoon light. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, one could see the fall foliage reflected in the Charles River. More than 200 guests representing Boston's high society were elegantly seated among the European classical furnishings. Golden bubbles from the champagne tower filled glass after glass. A string quartet's live performance enhanced the elegant atmosphere. Patricia Carter sat proudly at the main table. Wearing the latest Dior dress, a large diamond necklace sparkled at her throat. Society regulars gathered around her. "My son is finally going to have a proper family," Patricia said, continuing with a refined smile. "His partner works at some research facility, I believe." "Well, I suppose that's just how times are these days." Subdued laughter rippled through the group. Patricia's expression showed satisfaction at their response. "But I'm not worried. She'll naturally quit her job after marriage, of course." At that moment, the MC stood up with microphone in hand. "Now, we'd like to hear a few words from the groom's mother." Patricia rose with a broad smile. She elegantly raised her champagne glass and surveyed the room. When her gaze turned to the main table where the bride and groom sat, Amy responded with a quiet smile. "Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate my son James's wedding," Patricia began, speaking with practiced fluency. "The Carter family has contributed to Boston's development for 3 generations. It brings me immense joy to welcome a new member into our distinguished family." Patricia paused for a moment, her expression shifting. A hint of sarcasm played at the corners of her lips. "And I have another wonderful announcement to make today." She raised her voice while looking at Amy. "We finally have a wonderful maid in our house. Please feel free to use her services." Laughter spread through the venue. The high society guests seemed to be enjoying the witty joke. Even James smiled slightly at his mother's words. But Amy's expression remained unchanged. She quietly picked up her champagne glass and raised it with grace. Her figure, wrapped in a deep blue evening gown, appeared more dignified than ever. "Oh, Amy dear, it's just a joke. Don't take it personally," Patricia said with a triumphant smile. At that moment, there was movement near the entrance. Amy's parents slowly stood up. Robert Brown's distinguished features wore a solemn expression. Carol gazed at her daughter with warm eyes. "Now, for the real surprise." Robert's voice quietly resonated through the venue. The atmosphere in the room suddenly froze. The color drained from Patricia's face. James also wore a confused expression, unable to grasp the situation. The string quartet stopped playing, and even the sound of pouring champagne ceased. The eyes of over 200 guests turned simultaneously toward Robert Brown. The presence of the CEO of Boston's leading pharmaceutical company commanded the entire room. Amy rose slowly. Her pearl necklace gleamed in the setting sun. There was no longer any hesitation in her eyes. She intended to calmly witness every moment of the real surprise about to unfold. The expensive champagne glasses on the tables trembled slightly, like harbingers of the earthquake to come. The atmosphere in the room was heavy and tense, like the stillness before a storm. Patricia looked anxiously at Robert and Carol. The champagne glass in her hand shook slightly. James glanced between his mother and his bride, seemingly unable to decide how to respond. Robert Brown slowly took the microphone. His bearing exuded the dignity of a global pharmaceutical company's leader. The atmosphere in the room maintained a delicate, precarious balance, as if made of glass. Thank you all for joining us today at my beloved daughter Amy's wedding. With those words, a small murmur ran through the room. Patricia's face grew even paler. Amy Martin, no, Amy Brown. She is the head of Brown Pharmaceuticals Research and Development Division, and our next vice president, taking office next month. Robert's voice grew heavier. Carol stood quietly smiling beside her husband. And for those from Carter Real Estate, she is also your partner in a $10 billion development project. The room erupted in chaos. Boston's social elite voiced their surprise. Patricia nearly collapsed into her chair, sending a pleading look to her son James. We've been watching, as a sort of social experiment, to see how our daughter would be treated while working under the name Martin. Robert paused briefly before continuing. And today, it seems we have our answer. Amy rose gracefully. Her deep blue wedding dress sparkled in the twilight. Her expression no longer held false modesty. She radiated the dignified authority of a research and development division chief. Mother-in-law, Amy's clear voice rang through the silent room. Let me introduce myself not as your maid, but as someone who holds your company's fate in her hands. Patricia's champagne glass fell from her hand. The sound of crystal shattering on the marble floor rang sharply, as if symbolizing the shattering of her pride. This is a misunderstanding. Patricia cried out in a trembling voice. It was meant to be a joke. Everyone was laughing. Yes, indeed, everyone was laughing, Amy continued calmly. And that very laughter is precisely what we found problematic. In the corner of the room, people could already be seen checking their smartphones for news. The Boston Globe had already begun reporting on the incident. All new development contracts with Carter Real Estate are cancelled as of today, Robert announced in a matter-of-fact tone. Furthermore, we will be reviewing all existing business relationships. The weight of those words took the breath from everyone in the room. Carter Real Estate executives hurriedly stood up, phones in hand. Decades of corporate relationships were crumbling audibly in this moment. Wait. Please wait. James raised his voice for the first time. His handsome features were now distorted with fear. I had nothing to do with this. Mother's behavior. You bear your share of responsibility. Amy fixed her former fiancé with a cold gaze. Why couldn't you stop your mother's discriminatory behavior then? James was left speechless at this question. His silence vividly illustrated his own indecisiveness and moral negligence. In the corners of the room, guests could already be seen preparing to leave. The rules of high society are harsh. Everyone quickly distances themselves from a family showing signs of decline. Ladies and gentlemen, Amy addressed the entire room. Today's events are not merely a personal matter. They are a warning bell against discriminatory values that still persist in modern society, and the prejudices that lurk beneath the surface of supposed ladies and gentlemen. At these words, many guests lowered their faces. The guilt of having laughed along with Patricia's joke weighed heavily on them. Carol quietly approached and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. You made the right choice. Amy nodded slightly at her mother's words. Patricia had collapsed into her chair. Her heavy makeup was streaking with tears. James stood dumbfounded, unable to seek help from anyone. We'll take our leave now, Robert announced. Amy, let's go. Amy nodded quietly. She took one last look around the room. Luxurious decorations, expensive attire, refined manners. But now, the ugly reality that had lurked beneath that brilliant surface was exposed to the light of day. Mother-in-law, Amy turned back to address Patricia before leaving. I probably wouldn't have made a very good maid. But as a good executive, I'll be considering the future of your company. Those words were the final trigger. Patricia finally broke down in tears. Her appearance was now pitiable, unimaginably different from her previous haughty attitude. Amy departed the ballroom with dignified steps alongside her parents. 1 week after the wedding, morning sunlight streamed into the top-floor conference room at Brown Pharmaceuticals. As Amy quietly read the newspaper by the large windows overlooking Cambridge, her secretary hurriedly opened the door. Mrs. Carter is here. She's requesting to see you. Amy slowly put down the newspaper. Show her in. A few minutes later, Patricia Carter entered the conference room. Gone was her previous arrogance, replaced by a tired expression with minimal makeup. Though still wearing a luxury brand suit, her entire demeanor had completely changed. Amy, no, Ms. Brown, Patricia's voice trembled. Please, I beg you. No more sanctions. Sanctions? Amy responded in a calm tone. This is purely a business decision. We've determined that doing business with companies holding discriminatory values would significantly damage our brand image. But that was just a joke. In a social setting. Don't you think discrimination in social settings is even more malicious? Amy's voice took on a slight edge. How can you call humiliating someone in front of others social? Patricia lost her words and began to sink to her knees. Amy immediately raised her hand to stop her. Such actions are unnecessary. What I seek is sincere reflection and reform. At that moment, the conference room door opened again. James entered with aggressive steps. What is the meaning of this? he shouted in an agitated state. Because of you, the company, our family is falling apart. Amy fixed James with a calm gaze. Are you saying you bear no responsibility for this? James's voice trailed off. Mother's behavior was inappropriate, certainly. But our relationship. Your attitude was the biggest problem. Amy slowly stood up. Turning a blind eye to discrimination is the same as participating in it. The atmosphere in the conference room grew heavier. Outside the window, researchers in white coats could be seen busily going about their work. I'll present our specific conditions. Amy looked down at the documents on her desk. First, the complete resignation of Carter Real Estate's management team. Second, implementation of an anti-discrimination program within the company. Third, active promotion of women to management positions. That's... James choked on his words. Then our family. Your position is included, of course. Amy's voice was cold. We cannot entrust a company to executives who silently condone discrimination. Patricia clung to her son's arm. Her appearance was now unimaginably weak compared to her previous haughty attitude. As compensation, we also demand a donation of 30% of your personal assets to a fund supporting women's advancement in society. 30%. Patricia let out a cry. But our lifestyle. There's no need for concern. Amy's tone carried a hint of irony. I'm sure someone will hire you as a maid. At these words, Patricia's face turned blue. Her own words had come back to haunt her. I expect your answer within 3 days, Amy stated calmly. After that, we will immediately halt all transactions and pursue legal action. James started to say something but ultimately swallowed his words. His gentlemanly facade had completely crumbled. You know the way out. Amy pressed the button to call her secretary. This is your last chance. Make a wise decision. After Patricia and James left the conference room, Amy stood by the window again. She could see female researchers in white coats working energetically. Just then, a message arrived from her father Robert. The board unanimously supports your decision. Amy smiled slightly. This wasn't personal revenge. It was a necessary corrective measure against long-standing unjust discrimination. A few days later, the Carter family's response arrived. It was complete surrender. The Boston Globe's social pages carried new headlines. Carter Real Estate announces major reforms. Reflection on gender discrimination, concrete measures announced. Patricia Carter donates personal fortune to Women's Support Fund. Amy looked down at the evening cityscape of Boston from the top-floor window. The sunset reflecting on the Charles River seemed to herald the dawn of a new era. That night, Amy had a long-overdue phone conversation with her mother Carol. Any regrets? Her mother's voice carried a hint of worry. None, Amy answered with conviction. This was a necessary change. Not just for me personally, but for all women. After hanging up, Amy reviewed the documents on her desk. It was a proposal for a new research and development project. The names of many female researchers were listed there. 1 year later, in autumn, an important announcement was about to be made in Brown Pharmaceuticals' boardroom. The windows offered a panoramic view of Cambridge's fall foliage. Amy Brown calmly reviewed her materials. The new drug trials have reached their final stage, with results exceeding expectations. Amy's voice resonated with the board members gathered in the room. The market size is estimated at $50 billion annually. The Wall Street Journal had reported on this project last week as the biggest breakthrough in the pharmaceutical industry this year. The research and development team led by Amy had succeeded in developing an innovative treatment for intractable cancers. Outstanding achievement, Vice President Robert nodded with satisfaction. Your leadership has become the talk of the industry. Looking around the boardroom, several female executives could now be seen among what was once an all-male board. Amy's presence had become a symbol of many changes. After the meeting, Amy returned to her office. Today's newspaper lay on her desk. Reading the article, Amy reflected on the events of a year ago. The incident at the wedding had created ripples far beyond a mere scandal, sending significant waves through society. Amy, Carol quietly entered the office. Don't forget about our lunch appointment. Of course not, Amy smiled and stood up. Her pearl necklace gleamed at her throat. At a high-end restaurant's terrace, mother and daughter gazed at the city's bustle while talking. A letter came from Patricia. Carol took out an envelope. Would you like to read it? Amy nodded quietly and opened the letter. Dear Amy, since that day, I have thought about and learned many things. Through volunteer work at a nursing home, I've come to understand that a person's worth lies not in their titles or status, but in their humanity. I am now deeply ashamed of how my foolish prejudices and arrogance have hurt so many people. James has started working in sales from scratch at a branch office in a regional city. He too seems to be spending his days confronting his own weaknesses. Your decision imposed a harsh trial on our family, but perhaps it was the awakening we needed. While we lost much this past year, what we gained was even more precious. I no longer need titles or luxury. I feel I finally understand the importance of living rightly as a human being. Please forgive me. And thank you. Patricia Carter. Quite a sincere letter. Carol studied her daughter's expression. Amy nodded quietly. Real change sometimes requires pain. Through the restaurant window, they could see the bustle of Harvard Square. Young women walked with confident steps between campus and businesses. I gave a lecture at Harvard Business School last week, Amy said, picking up her wine glass. The female students' eyes were so bright. You've become their role model, Carol gazed proudly at her daughter. That night, Amy stood on her home terrace, looking out at Boston's night view. The city lights reflected on the Charles River's surface rippled gently. Messages kept arriving on her smartphone. Cooperation proposals from pharmaceutical companies worldwide, interview requests from business magazines, speaking invitations from women executives associations. Amy Brown had become one of the most watched figures in the business world. But her heart was already set on the next goal. Developing innovative medical technologies, nurturing more female researchers, and fundamental transformation of corporate culture. There was still so much to do. A knock sounded at the terrace door. It was her father, Robert. "Ready for tomorrow's board meeting?" "Yes, I have a proposal for a new project," Amy answered without taking her eyes off the night view. "The future you're aiming for seems clear now." Robert gazed proudly at his daughter's profile. "Yes. But it's only just begun," Amy smiled quietly. "Real transformation takes time." The evening breeze gently caressed her hair. Her pearl necklace gleamed softly in the moonlight. It had now become a symbol of her conviction and strength. The next morning's front page would carry articles about Amy's new challenge. Brown Pharmaceuticals revolutionizes industry with breakthrough drug. Next generation leader Amy Brown, the person behind the success. Female executive who broke through prejudice continues to challenge. In her interview, Amy had said, "If our generation doesn't change, the next generation will face the same problems." Transformation sometimes involves pain, but it's a necessary process. Society is definitely changing now. And making that change permanent is the responsibility of each one of us. A new sun rises over Boston. It seemed to herald the dawn of a new era, freed from old values. Amy Brown's story continues to light a beacon of hope in many people's hearts. And that light continues to spread, quietly but surely, even now.